Okay, part 3. So we've done a good few changes now, and what we should really be doing is saving. As you can see, some of this stuff is in bold. Some of it's headings and should be in bold, but anything that I've changed that isn't in the prefab is in bold to let me know it's not really, it's only saved into the scene. And it wouldn't happen if I dragged this into a new scene. So I'm going to hit apply. And as you can see, it's all unbold now. That means I can revert at any time if I make a mistake, or if I drag a new bean in, he'll have all these settings as well. Okay, and to make that official, you need to save the scene as well. Sometimes Unity's a bit weird. I think they fixed it now, but you used to have to save first. Now, that's quite basic. I think you've got the basic idea. We're going to get a bit more complicated now. I'm going to talk about the jump. So I'm going to go to here's one I made earlier. Let's just test, is he still there? Is he still working? Yeah, and he jumps and he goes through a few states and he churns. Okay, lovely. And he's got an idle animation, so we're still looking at the old one. I didn't make any idles, so he's doing some other animations. Okay, you can see things got a little bit more complicated in here. And I'm going to talk about the jump. So what's happening is I'm going from any state. So he could be walking forward, he could be idle, he could be in any of these, and instead of linking loads of them into the jump, I'm just using any. And the thing that sets that off is just a jump trigger. I talked about triggers. Here it is, jump. You want to make one, just hit trigger and put the name in. All of its settings are in here. I will just check the code and make sure. See, I think you might have to call it jump for it to work. So script, animator script. Don't be scared now, it's just code. I think go to your happy place if it's scaring it. Yeah, set trigger jump. So it's hard coded in there. You need that word in your animator as a parameter, and it has to be a trigger for this to work. So while he'll jump up in the air anyway, he'll physically go there. This actually causes the animation. Now if you really don't want to jump at all, you can just untick this on the can jump, and let's just check that. Yeah, nothing happens when I hit spacebar. That's just his idle animations happening. Okay, so we'll put can jump back. Now the first setting's jump speed. That's how fast he goes up in the air. Gravity I'm applying to him every frame, and it's at 10. That'll force him to come down, or if he walks off a ledge, he'll move downward. Maximum jump velocity, again, change. This is just to stop any huge changes in velocity, so he doesn't go shooting up into the air if something goes wrong. The jump height is self-explanatory, I hope. That's how high he goes, and you can adjust that. A little trick I like to use is you can actually hit play, and when you make changes, they won't be saved. So let's ramp him way up on the up. He's twice as up. So he's going to go a little bit higher. Now if I really wanted to keep that, and I like my settings, if I right click, why isn't that working? Yes, if I right click, I can copy component. And now when I stop playing, it'll go back to 10. Now if I really wanted to, I could paste component as values, and it'll go back to what I've set it at. So you can play it in real time and test how you like your rotation or your movement, and then copy and paste it like that. I'm going to go back to 10. I don't want that. And we've gone bold again, so I'll just apply back to 10. Jump by 2, I'm happy with that. So let's talk about the animation. So now we have the trigger. It's automatically going to happen when I hit spacebar and we start and we go into our first state, which is his takeoff animation. If you ever want to have a look at the animations or see what they're doing, you can click on the character, and you have a drop down list here of all the ones that are connected to him. And because they're imported, they're read only. You can animate anything in Unity. All you really need to do is, if I select a cube and I'm in my animation window, I can click here to create. I'll have to give it a name. It should go in my animation folder. That's scripts, assets, but I want animation, and I'm just going to leave it at new animation. Now I've got a timeline here. I can start with the record button on. You know how these work. You know, I can start changing its rotation, and you can see it's giving it a keyframe. I actually don't want any of that, so I'll let you play around with that yourself, but you can do your own. If they have the same hierarchy and the same naming conventions, you could copy them to another object very easily. Okay, but we don't want to melt your brains and do too much. Let's go back to my bean and his. Oh, by the way, that when I did do that, I think it added an animator, yeah, to the cube, and it built an animation controller as well for the scene. So it'll automatically do that when you use the animation window, which can be found in Windows Animation. And again, I've docked it next to my project. It mightn't be naturally open. So I don't want to see that animator. I want to see the bean one. Yeah, these are read only. That one I could write to it and make changes. So its next state, any of these states can end up going to Jumpland. Badly names. And I have this bool here called grounded, and in the script it's going to detect whether my character is touching the ground or not. So if at any point during his jump he hits the ground, these will automatically go straight into the grounded. So let's have a test of that. So he starts grounded, and if I jump on the pedestal here, we're not grounded. There we go. So it can interrupt his jump animation and he'll go straight to grounded. The second part, ascend, I could have put ascend and descend into one animation. There wasn't any need really. And again, just this, I've left, for a change, I've left has exit time on. So it will play for the duration of the jump ascend animation, which I cut up earlier. And then it'll automatically just, grounded is still false, so it'll go to the next descend. And again, it's just grounded is, if grounded is true when it gets to the end, or has exit time that's still ticked on, it'll go to my landed animation. And it's that simple. And after landed, I really want to go straight into idle. Okay, so it still takes input in the air. I'll show you a way to turn that off if you really want, but it'll still move and rotate while he's jumping, which you may not want. He's turning and he's landing. Okay, let's have a look at the settings again. Did I explain all that? Right, so the things you need for this to work, if you have it ticked on, you have to have one called jump to be a trigger, you have to have one called grounded to be a trigger. Okay, so the next thing is the fire button 1. There are inputs that are already set up by Unity. Sorry, my recording's getting in the way. File, assets, input. And as you can see here, there's my horizontal and vertical axis, and they've given them their own names. They say the buttons that affect them. So you've got A and D, left and right, the dead zone area and all that. I would not mess with these, but one of them is Fire 1, Fire 2 and Fire 3. I've only programmed Fire 1. If you want more, you can add them yourself. I've got a section for that, like I showed you before in the cable. You can disable Fire 1 if you want and just not have it do anything, but you need to call it, again, it's a strict name on this again, unfortunately, Fire 1, and it's a trigger. And with mine, I am going to make it holster and unholster. I'm not going to go into detail in these just yet because it's advanced and only a few people really need to do it. But it's the control key, and you can tell from the inputs. The setup for that, oh, we can actually change the name, I'm sorry, of the parameter. So you can actually write in here, you can call it whatever you like, but as long as that name matches this name, it'll work. I've also put in fire one time, and what this does is it's the amount of time in seconds between the inputs happening again. In case you were to hold the key down, or you don't want people consistently pressing the button because it's gonna start the animation stuttering and going back and forth, this will give you a little pause that it won't happen again immediately. You can add the number there, whatever you like yourself. And I'll just do a fire one here. Mine holsters and unholsters his pole, because I think a few people will need that. I've also set up a second pole in hand so I can tell which to parent from and to. And while that's happening, yeah, I have a block input, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. This bit gets just a little bit more tricky. So I have added an event to the script. I spoke about these earlier. I've added an event to the animation, is what I should say. And in Bean, I'll go in here and take item off back. And when I scroll down into events, you can see I have two events on the timeline here. The first one is disable input for seconds. Okay, it has to have that exact name, and if you want to find it, the only way you can find the exact name is by going into the script. So I'll do that. It's near the end. It's highlighted here, so you could copy it if you like and paste it, and you can see it takes a float for it to work here. Okay, code, scary, let's go away from that. Back to my import animation, and you can add an event anytime by just clicking this button, add event, and take off back. Take off jump, take off back item. You can drag these to anywhere you want them to happen on the timeline. This needs a float, like I said, so don't worry about these other fields, game object, string and int. You just want to put in the float, and that number will be the seconds that your vertical horizontal input is disabled, along with I think fire one as well. And you might need that for some scripts if you want them to do a little animation piece and you don't want them to start moving when people press the arrow keys. The second one I had here, I timed it on my animation timeline, and if I look at his take item off back, you can actually see it in here as well. And when it gets to that frame, I'm in the scene, that's when his hand touches the pole, and I want to then change the pole's parent from being just Bean, there's the pole, to actually going all the way down my root, down the spine. What? I don't apply revert. Into, I should be left hand, elbow, wrist, and left hand. Let's have a look at that happening. So there we go, there's our pole, and when I press fire one, it is now a child of the hand. Press fire one again, and it's back to there, being a child. Okay, and if you want to use that parameter, I know one or two people have that. It's the same setup. I'll be patronizing and go through it again. Apologies. Take item off back, and events, I've put it in here, it's a 0.33. These numbers on this timeline are like a percentage of the entire animation, so they don't completely match up with your animation. So you do need to move it about a bit, but if you go into your animation timeline, you'll see if it's on the right frame or not. Just make sure it's the right frame. If it's the wrong frame, you could end up being parented. If I go here, it'll be parented with an offset that looks bad. Okay, and the way you have to set that up in my script is when fired, disable, custom key, it's idle, reparent object. So I have the size set to 2 here. The size will start at 0 for everyone else when you open this, but it's again, here's one I've set up earlier. And what I need is, I need to drag and drop the pole into the child. This is the child I want to reparent. And the next part is going to be the fingers of the hand. I can just drag and drop that in here. You could click this menu, but there's so many things to go through. It's much easier to drag and drop at this stage. Set rotation and position. Now I don't necessarily need to use this, so I've put an option to turn it on and off, and I'll show you the difference that makes. So it's happening on the frame, but yeah, you can see already it's offsetting it, and it's causing a huge scale issue, and that's going to get worse and worse the more I do this. That's a possibility for that to happen if you don't have your frames lined up perfectly. So you mightn't want that. You might actually just want to force it to take a position, rotation and scale, and they're local. So what I mean by that is they're not world space. So when I do this once, I can just take a screenshot and copy these numbers in. That's exactly how I want it to stay all the time. And you could just go to your animation frame and then physically drag the parent in once. You'll break your prefab, but you can always undo it, and you can get those numbers to be correct so that they end up being this all the time. That will allow me to parent and reparent constantly. Now you can see here this is an array. It's got a size. There's 2 elements. The first one is for when it's on his back, so I want from the pole to his hand, and the second one is from his hand to bean, to the whole object. And that's obviously got a different parameter as well. Now I've also put in toggle an animation bool. I've done this for you mightn't need this. I've done this for my purposes because he's got 2 different states, and we'll have a look in the state machine when they happen. The first one is when he's unholstering it, and the second one is when he's holstering. So if I click on the reasons, fire 1 is the trigger, and if pole hand is false, we're going to do this one. And this is almost the same, but if pole hand is true, we're going to holster and put it onto his back, and they both go back into the idle. Okay, I think a few people need to use that. I'm sure there might be problems as we go. Hopefully I've explained that well enough. Let's get back to our script. So that looks a bit messy. You can collapse these. You only need to look at them when you're reading them. The next and last one, which I think might be a little bit of a requirement, is for a couple of idle animations. I didn't make any idle animations, so I'm using the takeoff jump, as you can see here, and I'm using the walk cycle, as you can see there. And my parameters for going into these are I've made an idle number, and if it's set to 1, it's an int. Int will give you the different options to float, and equals is one of them. So if this number is set to 1, it's going to play animation 1. You can have 100 here if you like, and if it's set to 2, it's going to go to 2. And it goes back just on has exit time. Now that's probably not good enough. You might want to set up some stuff yourself, because if someone hits that walk forward key, you want this to end. So you might want to add a state going to each of the walk states, which can be a bit tedious to do. Or maybe you can work something better out to go from any state to do these instead. Now this has got a similar setup to what I've explained previously. Some people hopefully might have skipped over what they didn't need. So to get this working, let's see what we need to do. First of all, there's a few fields to fill in. Function next idle setting. The first one is seconds. How long with your idle looping before we go to one of these? And I've just put 2 seconds because it's easy to see. You might want to make it longer. The second one is don't use idle anims. So if this is causing errors for you, you've got stuff popping up in the dialogue and you're not even that far, you can just tick this on. It'll ignore any of this happening. So if I just hit play, normally this should happen every 2 seconds. So 1, 2, nothing's happening. Let's tick it. Does that work? Yeah, then they're happening again. Okay. Now, idle animate state name. This has got to be an int. And you can name it whatever you want. And again, you just need to make sure that the parameter you make is the same name as idle animation parameter name. Got to make sure these two are the exact same. I'd say copy and paste. The amount of idle animations, I have 2 here. So we need that number so it knows if you want to do a random state or when it's actually played. What it'll normally do now is it'll go 1 and then 2. And it's going mad at the moment because I clicked something that I shouldn't have. What I can do is this will go to 1 first. Nope, I've got don't use on. It goes 1 and then 2. Now if I've got more than these, it'll make more sense if I do the random one, but there's only 2, so this just means it'll either be 1 or 2. And I could can I do the same one twice? I can't remember. Yeah, I think it just did. Okay. Now that's only half the setup. What we need to do is we need to put something into our idle animation, an event that tells it to start the clock ticking and to run the function to check which animation state to use next. That's all been scripted for you. So all you need to do here is in your project find your idle animation. Mine's only 2 frames long, and I'm clicking down on event. You'll want this at the start of the idle event, and it's going to happen. It's going to try this every time, but don't worry, there's a bit of code that says don't bother checking. We're already running the clock unless there's movement input. So you just click add animation event, and this again has to have a certain name in the function for it to work. And have I been I'll revert, I don't need to do that. Let's find out what the function name is. Function next idle, lowercase n, capital I for idle. Okay, let's go back in with our idle, and that's one I've already made, and you can see it says next idle. Can I delete that easily? No. Just add your event, and we want idle. Okay, I don't actually want that. There's no other parameter. I think it's I will be 100% sure. Yeah, next idle, there's nothing in these brackets, so there's no other parameter code. Let's not look at that. Revert again because it's working. Okay, so yeah, just be sure you have that right amount of idle animations. Again, it'll error if you don't. You can choose random or not. I've shown you block input. I think that's pretty much everything got to do with the script. So I think we're done. Now just the last thing to do is show you how to make a game out of it. What I'm going to need to do is have a look at my player settings. Okay, so this is general. You've got one for the iPhone, one for Android, and one for WebGL. You can specify some stuff. Default icon. Have I made stuff for this? Material. Yeah, there's a little logo. So will he go in here? There we go. So this will be the icon on the desktop. It'll be the image of the application. You can do something better than that, I hope. There's going to be a dialog screen that allows you to change the keys and customize them for the player. It has to be a certain size. Here's one I made earlier. Image size, it's a weird size. 432 by 163. It's a very weird size. Google it if you forget. And I've lost my player settings. Again, I've just set this to texture. I haven't done anything posh with this. I hope that won't error. And I need to go back to my player settings. I'll show you where they appear. Most of your other settings, you can have a look at a tutorial, or the Unity help pages are really good. When you click the little book, drag it over here. Help in most programs is rubbish. These ones are actually quite good, and it'll take you to per component. Each one's got their own little book on them, and they'll explain in more detail, or else just Google it and you'll find more information about all these settings. I'm not going to go into them, but you can go full screen, change the resolution, do lots of cool stuff you want for the start of your project. Okay, let's get on with making it, and that would be build settings. Now, scenes in build, I've none. So I just want this one that I have open, so add current scene. So when it starts, it'll just be this one. Standalone Mac. I'm on a Mac at the moment, God help me. So I'll just go with a Mac so I can run and build and show it to you. I don't think you need to tick development build. That'll give you profiler options and stuff. Again, this is a link to the inspector player settings I have open if you want to check. If you want to use any of the other stuff, you'd need an SDK. You need to get one off Xbox or PlayStation. There's an easy one to download for Android. HTML5 makes a web page for you. You need to host it somewhere, but that's kind of cool. And iOS, they make you jump through hoops. You even need a Mac machine to make one, and it's £100 for a developer license every year. So I think this'll do. And I'm gonna hit build and run. I'll figure out what I've done wrong after. So outside of my assets folder, I like to make a test build folder. I'll save in there, and this is tests. Here, one very uncreative naming conventions. Now I've hit build and run. You can just hit build, and it's compiling, and it'll compress my textures. And now we wait. Oh, here we go. Okay, this was the wrong size. Google the right size. It's been stretched, and I've missed Toon Bean Man. I've got resolution settings here. You can specify what these do in the build settings. Fantastic. I'm going to leave on. I'm going to make it windowed. I don't want it. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller too. Now, you could change your keys here. The player can have got their own choice to do what they want with joysticks and left shift buttons for fire and everything. So let's just hit play. Made with Unity, personal edition, and there we go. Okay. So there he is. He's doing all the things he should. He's jumping. There you go. Congratulations! If you've come this far, you've just made your first little computer game. It's rubbish, but it's your first one. Don't worry. Okay, hope that's helpful.